So I've got Richard Nelson here, who says that he managed to get to university from a Newcastle council estate thanks to the YTS scheme and a day-release vocational course at Newcastle College. After completing a degree in computer studies, he started working life as a software engineer and then jumped at the chance to teach ICT in further education, which he did for over 10 years. Within this role, he became a bit of a champion in all things e-learning and spent many hours supporting staff in a number of organisations developing their skills. He now works in teacher education at Bradford College. So if you'd like to say what your stance is.
The question was, can you be a good teacher without technology? And my stance is no, you cannot be a good teacher without technology for 3 reasons. One is support in your workload as a teacher. 2, communication, and then 3, motivation. We need to be able to use technology to support ourselves, to help develop and create better environments both for our learners and working environments for ourselves. And we need to grasp this technology and make use of it, and don't use that horrible excuses, oh, I don't have time to learn this. Rubbish. Okay? Everyone's got time to make, do and use something that's going to help them in their life. And if you poo-poo it and push it away, well, you're just making extra work for yourself. And it's identifying that technology and using it to help enhance what you're doing as a teacher, and then become a good teacher within the classroom. I've also suggested that it helps create effective communication. Without using technology, there's missed opportunities where we can inform our learners, communicate with our learners, get feedback from our learners. And without using the effective tools for communication, you're not a good teacher. And I've also suggested that technology helps motivate and stimulate learners and help them discover more. And I got a great quote after I wrote this and whinged a bit more to some colleagues. I got a great quote from one of my students themselves who, when we talked about using technology, was about could a person, a teacher, be good in a classroom without using technology? Well, yeah, in a classroom, isolated, away from everything, yeah, they can be great as they like, but it doesn't help learners explore and take things further and move out of the classroom and really create creative thinking learners. You know, what are you doing learning for? Is it, I could make all my learners pass all of the exams by opening the book and starting at page 1, and let's do a bit of rote learning. And it works effectively. It gets them to pass their test. But it doesn't help them to be creative thinkers, and that's what technology allows you to do. So therefore, without using technology, you are not a good teacher.
Thank you very much. Wow. Don't feel you have to say quite as much of that, especially the students. So with that, I'll pass on to Stephanie Hyde. Steph's a second-year student at the University of Manchester studying French. She's worked as a sales advisor at PC World, as a waitress and as a part-time e-marketing assistant with a work-based learning organisation. She'll be studying in Avignon and Paris for her 3rd year.
So I don't necessarily think that teachers do need technology to be effective, but I do think that it does enhance that ability to communicate first of all. I've gone through the whole school system, basically just being taught to regurgitate facts, told what to learn, this is what you need to pass, which is basically what, is it Ross? Richard, sorry, was saying. I've always just regurgitated facts and sort of been taught information after information after information and not had a chance to actually explore it myself. And I thought coming to university would give me an opportunity to be able to do that. But again, it's kind of the same process. Some teachers, yeah, they do embrace the technology and they do use it. But for example, like one of my tutors at university still uses a Word document with just citations on and puts that up on the board. Doesn't even use PowerPoint. If you've listened to me before talk about PowerPoint, it doesn't impress me. I've seen it since the beginning of school time. But there's so much more technology out there now. There's obviously iPads with apps that you can use for learning. I think that it can be used to just give us chance as students as well to work together in a collaborative way and to choose what we're interested in to study further. It's not necessarily just what we're told to say and what we're told to learn. We should be given the opportunity to sort of learn ourselves, and I think that's part of good teaching.
That's great, thank you. And Sam Shepherd, who is Advanced Teaching and Learning Coach at Kirklees College. He started teaching in 1999 as a teacher of English as a foreign language. I have to say, you've got a really similar career path to mine, so did I. And moved, it's not about me, is it? Sorry.
That's right.
Since then moved into the FE sector, first as an EFL teacher, then as a teacher of ESOL, and since then moved into subject-specific and generic teacher training and professional development. His role in college is now supporting and developing teachers in their training.
My stance on this was basically to say no to the question that does a good teacher need technology? Because for me the implication behind yes is that the technology, that the lack of using technology means you're a bad teacher. I definitely don't think that's the case. I mean, any piece of technology in the hands of a poor teacher can be badly used, regardless of how marvellous and interactive and interesting and motivating it is. It can still be badly used, and a pen and a whiteboard can be brilliantly used by a really good teacher. There's that danger that you see technology being used really badly, as Stephanie was saying before. You see VLEs being just used as materials repositories, interactive whiteboards as projection screens, that kind of thing. Mobile phones being demonised and turned off. I think there can be a correlation between good teaching and technology use. But that's not due to good teaching needing the technology, but because good teachers are often innovators and explorers and experimenters, and therefore they're going to be going out there and choosing things, trying things out and exploring all these different ideas, and technology is a really, really big part of that. And that's why, there's a correlation there, but it's not a causation. And that's why I said no.
We've also got Cal Duffy, who's a student at Huddersfield New College, or just about to finish. He's been studying politics, history and sociology for the past 2 years. He was also the Deputy Mayor's Consort for Hebden Bridge Town Council for a year during his first year of college. He's now finished college, his last exam's tomorrow. Good luck for that.
Yeah, I'd like to I have 3 points really, and my answer is no, you don't need to be a good teacher and use technology. Because first of all, I was saying this, was it Richard?
Yeah.
He was talking about communication and how you need technology to be able to communicate well, but surely the ultimate form of communication is the conversation between a student and the teacher, verbally. And I don't think anything can replace that, because that would just be silly. And you talk about creativity as well with technology, but surely you can be creative without technology. I mean, we've had eyes, creativity comes from the mind, not from technology. I don't think you can say that you need technology to instill creativity within students. And the other thing that I found quite interesting is the fact that the best universities, the best colleges, they are the best because they have smaller classes, they have less people to teach. Therefore, the conversation that you have is with less people, and it makes it easier for that conversation to mean a lot more. So, if you look at Oxford, Cambridge, they've got very small classes, and that's because they know that to be successful in studying, in education, you need to be able to converse. And technology is a bonus. I mean, if you've got supplies of technology that you can use, yeah, that's good. But that's at the end, that's not what you start off with. So that's why I said no.
Very interesting points coming out so far. So finally, we've got Ross Anderson, a lecturer from Hull College. Ross has over 7 years' experience teaching in the FE sector. Most of this time has been spent teaching difficult to engage 14 to 16 learners in an FE context by delivering a creative and engaging curriculum which integrates a range of e-learning and technology.
It's quite interesting to hear everybody else's point of view, but I believe that good teachers do need to use technology. And as a tutor myself, I feel that this world that we live in is constantly changing. And we're starting to fall behind sort of what's happening in the world, not just our own country and our own learners, but as in a marketplace with developing nations and things like that. that are built on new technologies. As a country, I think we're very behind that. And also as a teacher, you know, it's our job to meet the needs of our learners. And as we've had from down here, from Stephanie and things like that, if the learners aren't wanting to have this word thing and you know, this regurgitated PowerPoint thing on the whiteboards and stuff, then it's up to a good teacher to be able to see that and be able to adapt to the need of those learners. At the end of the day, you know, they're our client group, they're our future, they're who we are here for. It's not about us as teachers, it's about them as learners. Plus for me, with the type of learners that I teach, it's very difficult to sort of get a large amount of creative and engagement within the group. So using technology allows me to give that creative edge and engage the learners, and basically provide them with some transferable skills that for the future, you know, it's not going to go away. You know, this technology is going to be becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and more developed, and it's going to be on every item every day. And I think we need to be ready for that, and we need to make our learners ready for that. So I reckon good teachers do need to use technology.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've had quite a broad spectrum, lots of different ideas coming out. Let's see what you think then, and what sort of questions you'd like to pose. I think first of all we're taking one from one of the social media platforms. Kevin, are you feeding that back? If you'd like to tweet a question, that'll get passed back to me. So not sure which camera I'm looking at, but
There was one up there actually that said, does technology encourage students to be spoon-fed and not think for themselves?
So does technology encourage students to be spoon-fed and not think for themselves, was the question.
There was one upon the Twitter tag.
On the Twitter.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to kick off with it? Richard.
No. Technology allows students to widen their horizons. It's already been mentioned by Stephanie about being able to look beyond what is being taught within the classroom, research beyond that, identify other means. I saw a session today with the construction people talking about showing real-world simulations and really getting involved in other aspects of the topic, not being spoon-fed. There's lots of other ways of spoon-feeding, which schools do very well, but technology is not a part of that, no.
I was just going to say, one of my issues with that is the fact that with the use of technology all the time, the art of things like writing, people can't actually write that well anymore. So many people find it so much harder to write with a pen and paper than use a keyboard, and it's a shame to see that because it is a dying art. To see people actually writing an essay with a pen and paper, it's quite nice, but with technology, I don't know, it's just not, doesn't have that same sort of nuance with it, it's just, maybe it's a bit, no, but I just prefer seeing people write with a pen and paper. Yeah, exactly.
Now we use a pen and now we use a laptop. What, you know?
Yeah, I think that's important to note.
Sorry.
Go on. I think to pick up on that point and the spoon feeding, I think what we've got to realise is that, you know, when we look at the growth of technology over thousands of years, you know, it's only in the last 100 or so years that we've got, you know, cars and you know, electricity and things like that. But then in the past 100 years, we've got massively advanced weapons of warfare, we've got massively advanced computer systems, and this exponential growth is starting to become an issue. Now, I don't believe that, you know, handwriting and drawing and stuff will die out. But the spoon feeding, it entirely depends on what sort of person you've got delivering it, how they're going to deliver it, because as Richard said, I could take my learners and I can get them through any qualification you give me. Whether they're going to learn anything from it or whether they're going to benefit from it is a different story. And I think that it's these bad examples that are putting, you know, that are giving this negative view that good teachers don't need to use technology, because we found out that's why we're all here today. We know that technology can be used and it can have a massive impact on learning.
And you're right, and coming back to what you were saying, Cal, about that, about technology gives lots of options and possibilities. It's not saying don't ever use a pen again, but it's given those different options and accessibility to whatever the needs are, really. So. It's a good
No,
point.
yeah, I agree.
I think as well, just while you're mentioning that, I mean, the thing I notice as well is one of my biggest struggles with my learners is to stop them getting writing in text speak, or to be able to use spell check properly on Word, because it's set up automatically for US language and they can't understand the difference between S's and Z's and things like that. And I think, you know, it's when people miss those parts. There's no point in using it if you're not going to use it properly.
Can I just finish up this point by saying, in terms of spoon feeding, I think it's definitely not down to technology. I think that's down to schools and establishments. I think they're the ones that try and force on the spoon feeding because they want us to pass exams, basically. That's the first point I'll make. Second point is social media is there for us to communicate our ideas, to share them. Why not share them, you know, in terms of education, and share our ideas on our courses and stuff like that? Give it another view, and then allow somebody to take that on board, rather than taking on board just what the teacher's told you or just what's on your VLE. Actually share your ideas with your other peers, and embrace the fact that we've got this technology, and use it to the best potential that it's got, really.
And that's probably where people are, well, teachers are not making enough use of technology. They're using it very much as this kind of, as a spoon feeding tool, in terms of here's the resources, here's the PowerPoint presentation, here's the handout we're going to use. But what a lot of teachers aren't doing is exploiting the options available through social networking, through debates online, kind of using all those possibilities a lot more intelligently, and just banning them and saying, let's not have Facebook, let's not have Twitter, let's not have any of that stuff.
I think banning them is just an absolutely ridiculous idea, because, like, at our university, well, on my course we have a French Studies Social, but we use that all over exam period to share our queries and questions about exams. Most people are probably thinking the same thing, so then you can sort of, debate it over that, rather than, because people don't tend to use the forums on Blackboard because the tutors don't respond to them. They just put the information on there and then don't even use the forum. So, it is down to the actual use of the teachers of the technology, rather than just the students trying to use it and not being able to actually, engage with the teachers and just sort of sharing their own ideas, basically.
That's a good point, and it comes back to exactly what Cal was saying about communication and the difference between face-to-face communication and technology communication. Wouldn't you find, as a student, a lecturer that uses face-to-face communication and social networking or SMS technology as more, as a good teacher than someone who didn't?
Things like Skype, some tutors will be willing to do a Skype session with you. So it all depends on what training, the tutors have had as well. It's not always their fault that they don't know how to use it. But if the training is there and the funding is there, then I think it's imperative that teachers try and use it as much as they can. Really.
That has set off quite an interesting discussion. Thank you very much. Shall we take another?
Move on.
I was just going to say one final thing on the spoon feeding, and I know I've said this at this time of the event before. In FE, the way we are funded means that it is very difficult for us not to spoon feed, because if the learners don't pass, we don't get any money for it, and until that changes, then I can't see what we can do.
We could pick this up on Twitter. Clearly, it's sparked off. I'm sure these issues can come out on another question, but I'd just like to let somebody else redirect the conversation if they want to. Has anything come up on Twitter, or is there one on Twitter after that, Scott? Well, we'll take Will's question then.
Okay, so this afternoon and this morning we've seen some brilliant examples of teachers using technology in the classroom and really using technology to inspire students to learn. At the end of the day, those teachers go back into institutions where they still have to teach classes as herds of students moving through at the same pace. They all have to be taught at the same rate, they have to sit exams at the same time, they have to go for the same qualifications at the same rate. And so at the end of the day, we've got all these brilliant teachers using technology to enhance learning in the classroom, but the system still demands that we do things like we always have done. So at the end of the day, the system is still the same as it was 20 years ago, before we had all this brilliant technology. And the teachers are still as enthusiastic and as passionate as we've seen today, but somehow we're not using technology to change the system. And until we use the technology to change the system, it's fine to have these passionate teachers using the technology, but somewhere along the line, the system has to change to make a better use of it.
Can I jump in there?
That's kind of echoing your point, isn't it, Nathan? On a
Can I jump
yeah.
in there? Through the power of Twitter, someone who's not here, and I've put this on the feed now, is just showing the report from TEL about how the ideas from the research body about using technology more effectively in learning. They've come up with 12 key areas, blah, blah, blah. And what they seem to have done, I mean, this is a sort of government initiative type thing, so I haven't read it fully yet. I will check the small print. But they're looking at how businesses and home use of technology has flown forward, yet education hasn't. And like you were saying, it could be that, you know, we're being constrained by higher authorities or exam boards and stuff like that. And yes, we are. And how we change that, I don't know. But at our call, from us, from the bottom down, we need to challenge that, definitely. And, you know, just tell them, this is how I'm going to do something, this is how I'm going to assess it. If you don't like it, well, let's have an argument about it and discuss it. Because there's nothing I can't, one thing that really bugs me when I come to conferences like this is people go, oh, this is a good idea, but I can't use it in my organisation. Why not? Just use it and see what happens.
I'd like to follow on from that, because I mean, I completely agree. I'm a little bit of an anarchist at heart, and I think the vibe there is that, you know, if we all just become sheep and we all just accept that that's going to be our fate, then we're never going to be able to move on. We're never going to be able to move forward. We need to test the system. We need to push the system. At the end of the day, you know, I'm probably the one who knows my learners the best because I spend the most time with them. You know, my middle management probably doesn't know them as well as I do. My upper management won't know them. My principal probably won't know it. Now, that's no disrespect to them. The difference is I'm the one there that has to teach them and get them through their qualifications. And I'm the one that has to try and find the best way for them to achieve that isn't about spoon feeding, that isn't about, you know, and it's about working with those institutional demands and being able to overcome that. And, you know, as Richard's quite rightly said, you know, just go out and do it. You know, if you make a mistake or you get in trouble, it'll only happen once, maybe twice. Hopefully you won't get the sack. But you've got to test these things. And, you know, as teachers, I've said it before to a lot of people, you know, it's our job to be able to reflect and evaluate. You know, we have to learn. We have to learn through our learners. And, you know, we have to take risks, and sometimes they pay off, sometimes they won't.
I mean, talking about the structure, the way the education system works, it does need to be changed, but it's an economic question as well, because although we can get iPads into schools, we can get iPods into schools, and yeah, we can use them and everything, but if you've still got poor kids that go home and don't have an iPad or an iPod, but you've got rich kids that are still going home and they have access to all this technology, then surely that's not equal, because you're giving someone an upper hand. So I'd just like to point that out.
Well, isn't there a role there for institutions to not necessarily provide people with that technology, but give access to that technology to the more disadvantaged students and to give them that opportunity to engage with it?
That would be awesome if they could.
But then that goes back to money.
But yeah, it's an economic question whether there's enough money to do that.
But do you need to give every child? You know, there's been sort of a laptop for each child programs and things like. You know, when I talk about technology, I'm not just talking about an iPad or, you know, a single piece of technology. It's so much bigger than that. And technology and e-learning and stuff like that there's so many different ways of accessing it. And one thing that I've discovered recently with my learners is, you know, forgetting about phones and iPods and MP3 players, but even technology in the community, you know, being able to use a cash machine, being able to use information points when they're trying to find a timetable for a train or a bus and something. You know, there's a lot of adults that struggle with that, let alone young people. And I think, you know, when I look at the technology, I don't just look at it as being, you know, here's a game and play with it. It's so much bigger than that, and I think that comes down to good teachers being able to use that creatively for a purpose and knowing their learners to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, I accept that, but the fact that there's always, well, hopefully not always, but there's going to be children and students or whatever that won't always necessarily know that the technology for them to use is out there unless something's done to be able to supply them with that or inform them of what there is out there to use. There's always going to be people that have an unfair advantage.
Yeah, but you've got to remember back to what we can control. I mean, we've talked about having to, this final assessment. Maybe we cannot control this final assessment, but we can control the journey there. And that's where we can make the best use and create a rich learning environment. And as teachers, we need to control the content, not necessarily the hardware. So like if we can't afford iPads, well, as long as we create something that can be seen on iPads or a PC or a mobile phone, and hopefully all our learners then can have access, whatever they've got, and hopefully then we're not excluding anybody.
Just to sort of give an example of a provider that do actually really embrace the technology and use it to the full standard is someone like In Touch Care, which is Joe and Andy set there. They've got 3D screens, they've got Stan, he opens up, he's basically an alive man which the health and social care students can work on, do CPR. They've also got Molly, this is not technology talking about iPads and that sort of thing, but they've got Molly who is a live doll that can be lifted up and put into bed for sort of, working with disabled people and old people. That's brilliant for engaging the students and, on site. And, and then that can be videoed, that can be shown as evidence for work-based learning. That's just a brilliant example, first of all. And just to bring it back to what we were talking about breaking into the system, I think work-based learning does it a lot more. And I think, like, sort of universities and colleges tend to stick to the whole PowerPoint and that sort of thing, and not really expand and, stick to handwritten exams and what have you. But people like Joe and other organisations like, what was that one today? Independent training, where they have the cameras on their heads for videoing the, work-based learning, the assessments, so that the assessor can actually watch it back and actually, and see what's actually being done, rather than just a written piece of work. I think that's important to recognise that it is going on in work-based learning, and the system does need breaking in and it does need to be recognised, but I do think that some aspects are already being done.
I'd like to give some examples of how we have challenged authorities. Certainly when we've got Studio Code, we've got Stan, and I needed to take on not only QCA at that particular time, but the sector skills councils and the awarding organisations, because what they were saying is what we were actually working with our learners, we were not, it wasn't competency. I said, I accept it's not competency, but it's on the journey to competency, and I want to take the distance travelled as part of it. So that's one that happened a few years ago. But of late, we're in the workplace at the moment, we're in the marketplace. All awarding bodies are wanting to work with us. And certainly I've actually challenged a few awarding organisations of late. And recently I said to one awarding organisation, when one of my learners couldn't actually get her outcome, complete her apprenticeship because she hadn't done a poster, I said, absolutely bunkum. And I said, if we can't do and change things with you, then we'll be moving from you. So they said, how do you want us to assess? And that's what we've done.
Another round of applause for that one. I think your question seems to have been answered by a sort of the way that the system might be being changed. It sounds as though it's kind of a bottom-up approach, doesn't it? By the tutor saying, I'm just going to do it, so shoot me, sort of thing, revolution. And then...
We'll ask the same question next year. So.
Yeah, we'll ask the same question next year, yeah. And then Joe, sort of as the head of an organisation, challenging the accreditors. So it sounds as though it's sort of changed from...
awarding organisations coming to you now to say, if you'll come with us, we'll be very flexible with how we work with you and how you assess.
Yeah, like you say, we'll ask the question next year and see if we've moved forward. Steve? Oh, sorry, before you do, Scott, I know there was one on Twitter, wasn't there?
Well, I don't really know if
Do
I
you
want to talk to you now because I heard it ages ago. It's probably been covered.
Wait for the mic.
They're more, I think people can hear me.
It's just for the
They're more observations than questions, I think it's fair to say, but I think they are worth flagging up. A couple of people have mentioned that it's worth highlighting the role that technology has in improving accessibility for some learners. I think sometimes we talk about the digital divide and how technology can exclude certain learners, but it also can include learners as well, and I think we need to bear that in mind. Another question that was raised was who is going to support the use of this new technology that's coming. But I think in some respects we've kind of answered that question ourselves, in that we've all got a role in supporting the use of this technology. The learners, the teachers, the librarians, everybody really has got a role, unless the panel have got anything else they'd like to add to that. And I'm just quickly, one other point on Twitter as well, somebody's asked the question, why are colleges buying so many mobile devices? Just use the ones the students already have access to.
I think there's a problem there which kind of goes back to Carl's point about accessibility. Not all students have the same standard of technology, and therefore that becomes excluding rather than inclusive.
That's where we need to control what the content is. As a teacher, we can control the content and make sure it's available on these different devices. I'm a big advocate of the bring your own device, rather than education establishments wasting money buying these classroom sets of iPads. Waste of time. They've done that for years. Rubbish. Kids have got either iPads, or they've got their phone, or they've got something, some device, a laptop, a computer. We've got to get the content to allow them to get access to it. Then we're not restricting them and excluding them by saying, you've got to use an iPad. Oh, it's an iPad app. You've got to use an iPad.
But that's sorry.
It's okay, no, just
that's a really big assumption, because I walked into talking about students, and I walked into a group of PGCE trainees, and we were doing a session on ILT, and I had all these bits of technology, web resources, I had a bunch of iPads, I had my iPhone, iPad, all the rest of it. But the first thing I said was, okay, let's get your phones out and have a look at them. And just as a kind of a quick survey of their kind of what they had, 3 of the 8 had iPhones, a couple of them had Android phones which they didn't really know how to use very well, and then a couple more just had a very, very basic Nokia phone. And had they then gone in and said, okay, let's get these apps, let's do all these different things, then those 2 students, this is a teacher training course, by default would have been excluded by me favouring all the people with the Android phones and the iPhones and so on and so forth.
But it would be available online though. So when they go on the computer, you're not excluding them, they can still see it in that way. And some people don't like to look at a lot of the stuff on their phones, they'll then go back to the website. If the website can then be seen on several different mobile devices, you're not excluding them.
I see your point about having it for different.
The content.
Yeah.
I apologise, I forgot about trainee teachers, but I talk about students. They're not a great example of people who can use technology. I'll keep thinking back to 16 to 18-year-olds, and when you walk into a classroom there, I admit not everyone's got the greatest smartphone, because they do cost a lot of cash, but they do have some sort of access. And if they haven't, well, you make it in a way where they can work together as groups. When I used to do video work a few years ago, and I said, right, I'm not bothering with video cameras because it takes too long to download from a videotape. I'm not editing, I'm not getting involved with that. Get your phones out. You've all got phones, you've all got cameras on your phones, and they're like, oh, I haven't. But 4 of them had. Great, right, there's 4 groups there. That person will use that, and it's using the technology that the learners have got, but using it in a way to make sure it is inclusive. So
Can I just...
Sorry, just...
I just wanted to...
Could always give them a book, yes.
Sorry, you'll have to show me that later, I'm not sure.
I just wanted to answer that point, because I mean, if colleges are going out and just randomly buying all this equipment, I would like to know what research and what thoughts they've had behind it, because obviously the point of view we've got over here is that you don't necessarily need that. It's not, we don't need to have iPads and iPods all the time. It's about making creative use of what you have got, and perhaps seeing what your students need to then decide in order what you are going to buy, because there's no point in wasting thousands and thousands of pounds on something that's going to be redundant in a cupboard just because it's flashy and fancy.
And out of date in 1 year.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the point, is that, I mean, pen and papers aren't out of date. An iPad will still do what an iPad will do in 5 or 10 years' time, but it's using that creativity to use it as an engaging piece of equipment, rather than, I think the point I make with technology is that some people that I work with miss the point that technology, you don't have to, it's not, you know, what learning is there in technology? Well, there's not a lot of learning in technology. It's that vehicle for learning. It's that little bit, you know, of something that you're embedding that just sets up those little sparks in somebody's head and things like that.
So
Thanks very much.
One of the things I found really interesting today is like how much I've learned as a student coming to somewhere where teachers learn how to use technology, when actually there's very little sort of workshops or whatever for students to learn what technology is out there. I mean, I've had to discover most of the technology that I use by myself because I've not been taught that. Whereas here, you're getting taught how to use it, but whereas we don't have workshops or conferences that are based on technology, so that'd probably be an idea for the future.
But how many students would turn up to those on a regular basis?
Well, if you made it compulsory, say.
But Carl's right. If that support's available, they'll know what's out there. They'll know what's out there, and you get support in using it. I mean, I've been to a few organisations where teachers are trying to promote all this. Use to create videos, do this, do some podcasts. But there's no support in the entire organisation for the learner. Once they leave the teacher, they're out there and they don't know what to do.
Right, finally, if Nathan, can you just give your last comment and then we'll have to wrap it up there. It has been as heated as I thought it might be.
I'll try and keep this brief. I just think we have to be very careful by saying that because not all learners have the most sophisticated technology, we shouldn't or can't take advantage of it. If you take that to its logical conclusion, where we work, a significant number of learners don't have PCs at home, and an even greater number who do have PCs don't have the internet. On that basis, we wouldn't have PCs in our college at all, because some learners don't have it. Actually, we have a large number of PCs available through our learning resource centres. We loan learners laptops, which they can take around the college. We loan learners iPads that they can take around the college, cameras, things like that. That's all available. So that is how we meet that disadvantage. And learners can use internet cafes if they want to. So I just want to be careful saying that because some learners don't have that, then we shouldn't use it. And I think Richard was spot on. If you've got 4 learners in a class with a camera phone, that's your 4 groups. So.
You're right about that, and there's always a way of getting onto the internet. I mean, the digital divide at the moment within the country is broadband access, and some places have it and some places haven't, and mobile phone access, some people have got good, some people haven't, but that's the divide. It's not hardware anymore. Hardware is cheap as chips in comparison to what it was. So the haves and have-nots as far as hardware is concerned is more the bothered and not bothered. However, the connectivity is a different question altogether. But they can get that at the institution, hopefully, or the library, or Wi-Fi, or if anyone likes Starbucks, or McDonald's.
I think that's really important, is the fact that we do see that connectivity out in society, and there are numerous colleges and institutions around the country that have got nowhere near as much connectivity as your local McDonald's, Starbucks and Costas, and all other good coffee vendors. And I think that's, this is where we've got to be careful. We have to provide that environment for learners in education, which is similar to that which they get in society.
So can I just say, I agree with what the gentleman said, but you can't just have one blanket policy, because people do slip through the net, so you've just got to take into consideration the other factors, what we've already mentioned.
I think it's just about having the choice to use it if you want to use it as well. So if it's there, then you can.
Going back to the original question, you still can't be a good teacher without using technology, though.
You
it's
believe.
not about...
You never let us go.
Well, thank you to all. I don't think we really had long enough for this debate. I mean, this really has been one that split opinion, and I wish we'd had longer actually, so that the panellists could have said more, and possibly those people here that could have said more. I hope that was at least a little bit kind of thought-provoking and interesting as a last session. It certainly was interesting for me. So thank you to all of you for being here and online, and especially to our 5 panellists.